The howling wind tore through Mineral Point, Wisconsin, as Rebecca Randall clutched her shawl tighter around her swollen belly. The bitter autumn chill of 1873 cutting through the thin fabric like knives against her skin. 6 months pregnant and alone, she made her way down the muddy Main Street toward the town market, her worn boots splashing through puddles left by yesterday's rain. Her husband's grave was still fresh on the hill, overlooking their small homestead, Thomas Randall, killed in a mining accident just 2 months prior, leaving her with nothing but a handful of coins and a child on the way. Rebecca pushed a stray copper lock from her face as she approached Wilcox's General Store, the only place in Mineral Point that carried the special tea her mother had taught her would ease the aches of pregnancy. The bell jingled as she entered, and immediately she felt the weight of stares from the gathered townsfolk. She kept her eyes down, knowing what they thought of her, a widow who couldn't possibly manage on her own, a burden soon to fall upon the town's charity. "Morning, Mrs. Randall," Mr. Wilcox said from behind the counter, his tone not unkind but reserved. At 32, Rebecca was no stranger to hardship, but nothing had prepared her for the isolation of widowhood in a frontier town. "Morning," she replied softly, moving toward the shelves of dried goods. She calculated each item against the meager coins in her purse: flour, salt, a bit of coffee, perhaps some sugar if she could stretch her budget. "Well, look who's still in town," came a sharp voice that made Rebecca's shoulders tense. Mabel Thornton, wife of the bank manager, stood with her friends near the fabric display. "I would have thought you'd have returned to your family back east by now." Rebecca straightened her back, though her heart raced. "My home is here, Mrs. Thornton. Your home." Mabel laughed, the sound echoing in the now quiet store. "A dilapidated cabin with half a roof. How do you plan to raise a child there? Or are you expecting the good people of Mineral Point to shoulder that burden?" Heat rose to Rebecca's cheeks as several customers murmured in agreement. She reached for a sack of flour, struggling with its weight against her pregnant frame. "Thomas Randall always was a dreamer with no sense," continued Mabel, gaining confidence from her audience. "Couldn't even provide proper security for his family before getting himself killed." Rebecca's hands trembled as she placed the flour in her basket. Thomas had been many things: stubborn, sometimes reckless, but he had loved her fiercely, and he had dreamed of giving their child a better life than either of them had known. "Perhaps," Mabel added, her voice dripping with false concern, "the baby would be better off with a proper family. There are childless couples who could provide what you clearly cannot." The basket slipped from Rebecca's fingers, spilling its contents across the wooden floor. Tears welled in her eyes as she knelt awkwardly to gather her items, her pregnancy making the simple task difficult. "That's quite enough," came a deep voice from the doorway. The store fell silent as Isaac Reynolds stepped inside, removing his hat to reveal dark hair with threads of silver at the temples. At 38, Isaac had been riding the frontier for the better part of 2 decades. His reputation as both a skilled rancher and a man unafraid to use the Colt revolver on his hip when necessary preceding him wherever he went. He'd arrived in Mineral Point just 3 weeks prior, purchasing the abandoned Whitaker property on the outskirts of town. Few knew much about him, save that he kept to himself and paid in cash for everything he needed. Isaac crossed the room in long strides, his spurs making a rhythmic sound against the wooden planks. He crouched beside Rebecca, gathering the spilled items with careful hands. "Allow me, madam," he said quietly, his voice carrying the slight drawl of Texas. "Thank you," Rebecca whispered, too embarrassed to meet his eyes. Isaac helped her to her feet, then turned to face Mabel Thornton and her cohort. His expression remained neutral, but something in his steel-gray eyes made the women step back. "Mr. Wilcox," Isaac called to the shopkeeper, "I'll be paying for this lady's groceries today." "That's not necessary," Rebecca protested softly. "Perhaps not," he replied, "but I'd consider it a personal favor." Mabel sniffed. "How charitable of you, Mr. Reynolds. Though I wonder if your charity extends to all unfortunate women or just the pretty ones." Isaac's face hardened. "Mrs. Thornton, I wonder if your husband knows how you speak to those facing adversity." "From what I understand, Mr. Thornton was once himself the beneficiary of considerable charity when his first business ventures failed." Mabel blanched, her mouth opening and closing without sound. Isaac turned back to Rebecca. "What else did you come for today, Mrs. Randall?" she supplied. "Rebecca Randall, and truly I can manage my own shopping." "I've no doubt," he answered, the corner of his mouth lifting slightly. "But perhaps you'd indulge me. I find that good deeds are in short supply these days, and I've been remiss in my quota." Despite herself, Rebecca felt a small smile form on her lips. There was something in his eyes, not pity, which she could not have borne, but a simple recognition. The recognition of one who has also known hardship. "I needed tea," she admitted. "Chamomile, if Mr. Wilcox has it." Isaac nodded and gestured toward the counter. Rebecca moved forward, aware of the stairs but finding them easier to bear with the tall stranger beside her. As Mr. Wilcox gathered her items, adding the chamomile tea and, at Isaac's insistence, a jar of honey and a small sack of hard candies, Isaac leaned slightly toward Rebecca. "You deserve kindness, Mrs. Randall," he said quietly for her ears alone. "Every soul does, but especially those fighting the hardest battles." The simple words, spoken without expectation or judgment, broke something loose inside Rebecca. She had held herself rigid against collapse for so long that the unexpected compassion nearly undid her. "Thank you," she managed, blinking rapidly to clear her vision when her goods were packaged. Isaac paid without comment, ignoring Rebecca's renewed protest. He helped her arrange the parcels in her arms. "May I see you home?" he asked. Rebecca hesitated. The propriety of allowing a strange man to accompany her home warred with the practical reality of carrying her purchases the mile to her cabin. "I have my wagon outside," he added, seeming to read her thoughts. "It would be no trouble." "Then yes," she decided. "Thank you, Mr. Reynolds." As they left the store, Rebecca heard Mabel's voice resume its commentary, but found she no longer cared what the woman thought. The simple act of kindness from a stranger had armored her against the barbs, if only temporarily. Isaac helped her into his wagon, then climbed up beside her and took the reins. "Which way?" "North, along the creek road," she directed. "It's the small cabin just before the old mill." Isaac clicked to the horses and they set off, leaving the town behind. The autumn landscape spread around them, rolling hills ablaze with red and gold, the creek a silver ribbon cutting through the valley. For several minutes they rode in silence, the only sounds the creak of the wagon and the steady clop of hooves on the packed dirt road. "How long have you been in Mineral Point, Mr. Reynolds?" Rebecca finally asked. "3 weeks," he answered. "Bought the old Whitaker place." "That's good land," she observed. "Thomas, my husband, always said it had the best water access in the county." Isaac nodded. "That's what drew me to it. I plan to raise horses. Good horses need good water." "You're from Texas," she guessed, noting his accent. "Born there," he confirmed. "Been all over since. California, Montana, even up to Canada for a spell." He glanced at her. "And you?" "Born in New York, but I've been here 7 years. Thomas brought me after we married. He worked the lead mines until—" She trailed off. "I heard about the collapse," Isaac said softly. "I'm sorry for your loss." Rebecca nodded, her hand unconsciously moving to her stomach. "Thank you." The wagon rounded a bend, and her small cabin came into view. It sat nestled against the hillside, sheltered by a stand of oak trees. Smoke rose from the chimney she had banked the fire before leaving, and her few chickens scratched in the yard. It was humble with its weathered logs and sagging porch, but it was home. "It's not much," she said defensively as Isaac studied the cabin. "It's solid," he countered. "Good location, protected from the north wind." As they pulled up to the cabin, Rebecca noticed Isaac's assessing gaze, taking in the broken fence, the loose shutter, the woodpile that would not last the winter. "Mr. Reynolds," she began, "I appreciate your kindness today, but I want to be clear. I'm not looking for charity or a protector. I'll manage on my own." Isaac helped her down from the wagon. "I've no doubt you will, Mrs. Randall." He handed her the packages. "But everyone needs a neighbor now and then. Even in Texas, we understood that much." Rebecca smiled despite herself. "Then as a neighbor, would you like to come in for coffee? It's the least I can offer in thanks." Isaac hesitated, then nodded. "I'd be obliged." Inside the cabin, Rebecca busied herself with the stove, grateful that she had cleaned that morning. The single room was sparsely furnished but neat: a table and 2 chairs near the small window, a bed in the corner with a colorful quilt, a rocking chair beside the hearth. Shelves along one wall held her few books and keepsakes. Isaac removed his hat, standing awkwardly until Rebecca gestured to the table. "Please sit. The coffee will be ready shortly." As the water heated, Rebecca put away her purchases, conscious of Isaac's presence. Few men besides Thomas had ever been inside her home, and she found herself suddenly aware of the intimacy of the small space. "How far along are you?" Isaac asked, breaking the silence. 6 months, Rebecca replied, placing cups on the table. "The baby should come in January." "Winter birth," Isaac nodded. "My mother used to say winter babies are strong. They come into the world facing the hardest season first." Rebecca poured the coffee. "My mother said the same." She sat across from him, wrapping her hands around the warm cup. "Do you have family, Mr. Reynolds?" A shadow crossed his face. "Not anymore. My wife and daughter died of fever 5 years ago in Dallas." "I'm sorry," Rebecca said softly. "It's a terrible thing, losing those you love." Isaac nodded, his eyes meeting hers with a shared understanding that needed no words. In that moment, something passed between them, a recognition of matching wounds, of survival despite loss. "What will you do?" he asked after a moment. "After the baby comes?" Rebecca had asked herself the same question countless times. "Keep going," she answered simply. "The cabin is mine, free and clear. I can grow enough to feed us, and I can sew for folks in town. We'll manage. The winters here are harsh." "I'm aware," she said, a touch of steel entering her voice. "This will be my 8th winter in Mineral Point. I'm no delicate flower, Mr. Reynolds." He smiled, the expression transforming his weathered face. "That much is evident, Mrs. Randall." They finished their coffee in companionable silence. When Isaac rose to leave, he paused at the door. "I meant what I said in town," he told her. "You deserve kindness. And if you'd permit it, I'd like to bring you some firewood next week." As one neighbor to another. Rebecca wanted to refuse, to prove she needed no one's help, but Thomas had always called her pragmatic, and the truth was, she did need firewood. As one neighbor to another, she agreed. "Thank you, Mr. Reynolds." "Isaac," he said. "My name is Isaac." "Then thank you, Isaac," she replied. "I'm Rebecca," he nodded, settling his hat back on his head. "Until next week, Rebecca." As she watched him drive away, Rebecca felt something she hadn't experienced since Thomas's death, a small, fragile sense of hope. Not for romance or rescue, but simply for connection in a world that had grown cold and isolating in her grief. She placed her hand on her swollen belly, feeling the baby kick beneath her palm. "We'll be all right," she whispered. "One way or another, we'll be all right." True to his word, Isaac returned the following week with his wagon loaded with split logs. He stacked them neatly along the side of the cabin, while Rebecca made a stew from vegetables from her small garden and a rabbit Isaac had brought. "You don't need to bring food," she told him as they ate at her small table. "I can provide for myself." "The rabbit ran in front of my horse," Isaac said with a shrug. "Seemed wasteful not to make use of it." Rebecca wasn't fooled, but she accepted the gift with grace. After they ate, Isaac examined her roof, frowning at what he found. "You've got some loose shingles," he informed her. "Won't last the winter." "I know," Rebecca sighed. "Thomas was going to fix it before." She trailed off. "I'll get to it when I can." Isaac studied her for a moment. "I could do it. Next time I come." Rebecca started to refuse, then reconsidered. Pride wouldn't keep her and her baby warm when snow came through the roof. "I'd pay you," she insisted. "I may not have much, but I won't accept charity." "No charity," Isaac agreed. "But maybe we could trade. I'm a decent carpenter, but a terrible cook. You could teach me to make bread like you had with dinner." Rebecca knew the trade was hardly equal, but she recognized the gesture for what it was, a way to preserve her dignity while accepting help she desperately needed. "Deal," she said. And so began a pattern that carried them through October and into November. Each week, Isaac would come to work on Rebecca's cabin, fixing the roof, repairing the fence, reinforcing the chicken coop against predators. In exchange, Rebecca taught him to cook different dishes and mended his clothes when they needed repair. They learned each other's stories in pieces. Isaac told her about his ranch in Texas, about his wife Eliza and their daughter Sarah, about the fever that had taken them both in a single terrible week. "I couldn't stay after that," he explained one evening as they sat by her fire. "Everything reminded me of them, so I started riding. Took work where I could find it, trail drives, breaking horses, even mining for a spell in California." "What brought you to Wisconsin?" Rebecca asked. Isaac was quiet for a moment. "Exhaustion, maybe. I'd been running for 5 years. Figured it was time to stop." Rebecca understood. She told him about her childhood in New York, her parents who had died within a year of each other, leaving her alone at 23. She told him about meeting Thomas, a passionate young man with dreams of finding fortune in the Western Territories. "He convinced me the future was out here," she said, smiling at the memory. "And for a while it seemed he might be right. The mine was producing well, we had this land." "He sounds like a good man," Isaac said. "He was," Rebecca confirmed. "Stubborn and sometimes reckless, but good-hearted. He would have been a wonderful father." The baby kicked then, a visible movement beneath her dress, and Rebecca placed her hand over the spot. "May I?" Isaac asked, gesturing toward her belly. The request surprised her, but she nodded. Isaac's large hand rested gently on her stomach, waiting. When the baby kicked again, his eyes widened in wonder. "Strong," he observed. "Like its mother." Rebecca felt a warmth spread through her that had nothing to do with the fire. She had forgotten what it was like to have someone share in these moments, to not face everything alone. As November progressed, snow began to fall on Mineral Point. The cabin was now weathertight, the woodpile substantial, and the root cellar stocked with vegetables from Rebecca's garden and game that Isaac brought. Rebecca knew she was better prepared for winter than she would have been on her own, but she worried about the increasing frequency of Isaac's visits. "People will talk," she said one afternoon as they worked side by side, Rebecca quilting while Isaac repaired a chair. "Let them," he replied simply. "It's different for a man," she pointed out. "A widow with a child on the way, I'm already the subject of gossip if they think we're." Improper, it could make things harder when I need to sell my sewing or trade in town. Isaac set down his tools. You're right. I hadn't considered that. He thought for a moment. What if I came on the same day each week? Sunday afternoons, perhaps, regular enough to be respectable, like a proper calling. The suggestion brought a blush to Rebecca's cheeks. A gentleman caller was traditionally a suitor, and they both knew it. Is that what this is? She asked quietly. A proper calling. Isaac met her gaze steadily. I enjoy your company, Rebecca, more than I've enjoyed anyone's in 5 years, but I respect your situation and I'd never presume. Rebecca looked down at her quilting. The truth was, she had come to look forward to Isaac's visits with an anticipation that both thrilled and frightened her. It seemed disloyal to Thomas, somehow, to feel this connection to another man when her husband was barely cold in his grave. Sundays would be fine, she finally said. After church. Isaac nodded, and they returned to their tasks, the air between them charged with unspoken possibilities. The first real blizzard hit Mineral Point in early December, 3 days before Christmas. Rebecca awoke to howling winds and a world transformed into blinding white. She spent the day keeping the fire fed and worrying about her chickens in the coop. By late afternoon, the storm showed no signs of abating, and Rebecca realized with alarm that her firewood supply, which she kept on the porch for easy access, was running dangerously low. The main woodpile was only 30 yards from the cabin, but in the blinding snow it might as well have been miles. As darkness fell, Rebecca faced a difficult decision. The temperature was dropping rapidly, and without more wood, the cabin would grow dangerously cold overnight. Wrapping herself in every layer she could manage, she prepared to venture out for more logs. Just as she reached for the door, a pounding came from the other side, nearly causing her to cry out in shock. She hesitated, then called, "Who's there?" "Isaac," came the muffled reply. Relief flooded through her as she unbolted the door. Isaac stumbled in, covered in snow, his arms full of firewood. He dropped the logs near the hearth and turned to close the door against the howling wind. "What are you doing here?" Rebecca asked, helping him remove his snow-crusted coat. "Worried about you," he answered, his teeth chattering from cold. "Knew the storm might last days, brought supplies." He gestured outside where she could just make out the dark shape of his horse. "You rode through this?" she asked incredulously. "You could have frozen to death." "Had to make sure you were all right," he said simply, as if braving a blizzard was the most natural thing in the world. Rebecca busied herself stoking the fire and putting on water for coffee, her mind racing. The storm made it impossible for Isaac to return to his ranch tonight. Propriety dictated he shouldn't stay, but freezing to death seemed the worse alternative. "You'll have to stay until the storm passes," she finally said, her back to him as she worked at the stove. "I'll sleep by the fire," Isaac assured her, reading her concerns. "No one will ever know I was here." Rebecca turned to face him. "I'll know," she said softly, "and I'd never forgive myself if something happened to you because you tried to leave." They settled into an awkward domesticity as the evening progressed. Rebecca made a simple supper from her stores, and they ate in companionable silence as the wind rattled the shutters Isaac had installed just weeks before. After dinner, Isaac insisted Rebecca take the bed while he made a pallet by the hearth. Despite her protests, she finally acquiesced, exhaustion from her pregnancy making the decision for her. In the night, Rebecca awoke to pain sharp, insistent cramps that made her gasp. She tried to rise quietly, not wanting to disturb Isaac, but a particularly strong pain forced a moan from her lips. Isaac was at her side in an instant. "What is it?" "The baby," she managed. "Something's wrong, it's too early." Fear crossed Isaac's face, but he quickly masked it. What can I do? I need the blue tin on the shelf. It has herbs and hot water. Isaac moved with efficient calm, bringing her the tin and heating water while Rebecca breathed through another contraction. She mixed herbs into a tea with shaking hands. This should slow things down, she explained. My mother was a midwife. She taught me. Isaac helped her drink the bitter tea, then sat beside her, his strong hand enveloping hers. What else? Just wait, she said, and pray. Through the long night, Isaac stayed by her side as the pains gradually subsided. By dawn, the contractions had stopped completely, and Rebecca finally fell into an exhausted sleep, her hand still clutched in Isaac's. She woke hours later to find Isaac stoking the fire, the storm still raging outside. He brought her broth and insisted she remain in bed. The baby? He asked anxiously. Rebecca placed a hand on her belly, feeling a reassuring movement. Still with us, she said with relief. It was a warning, I think. My mother would have called it false labor, but it means I need to be more careful. Isaac's expression was grave. You need a doctor. Mineral Point has no doctor, Rebecca reminded him. The closest is in Madison, and no one could travel there in this weather. When the storm clears, Isaac, she interrupted gently, I can't afford a doctor from Madison, and even if I could, I can't travel that far in my condition. The frustration on his face was evident. There must be something we can do. There is, she assured him. I can rest, as I'm doing, and when the time comes, Mrs. Peterson from town has delivered more babies than most doctors. She'll help me. Isaac didn't look convinced, but he nodded reluctantly. At least promise you'll be careful, no more hauling water or wood. I'll come every day to check on you. People will talk, she reminded him. Let them, he said firmly. Some things matter more than gossip. The blizzard lasted 3 days. By the time it finally cleared, leaving Mineral Point buried under 4 feet of snow, Rebecca and Isaac had fallen into a routine of quiet companionship. He told her stories of his travels to pass the time, and she taught him to knit, laughing at his clumsy attempts with the needles. On the morning Isaac prepared to leave, Rebecca stood in the doorway watching him saddle his horse. The sun on the snow was blinding, the world a sparkling white as far as the eye could see. Thank you, she said, for staying, for everything. Isaac adjusted the saddle strap, not meeting her eyes. I'll be back tomorrow with more supplies. Isaac, she said softly, what are we doing? He finally turned to face her. I don't know, he admitted. I just know that when that storm hit, the only thing I could think about was getting to you, making sure you were safe. He took a step toward her. I thought I was done with caring that much about anyone. After Eliza and Sarah, I swore I'd never put myself through that again. And now, Rebecca asked, her heart pounding. Now I'm terrified, he said honestly, because I care what happens to you, to your child, and that gives life the power to hurt me again. Rebecca understood completely. She had felt the same resistance, the same fear of opening herself to more loss. We're quite a pair, she said with a small smile, both so afraid of what might happen that we might miss what's happening. Isaac's eyes held hers for a long moment. Then, with careful deliberation, he removed his glove and placed his warm hand against her cheek. Rebecca Randall, he said softly, I think I'm falling in love with you, and it scares me half to death. The simple honesty of his words made her breath catch. It scares me too, she whispered. He leaned forward slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, and pressed his lips gently to hers. The kiss was tentative at first, then deepened as Rebecca responded, her hand coming up to rest on his chest. When they parted, Isaac rested his forehead against hers. I should go, he said reluctantly. Before the trail gets worse, Rebecca nodded, stepping back. Tomorrow, he confirmed, mounting his horse. Try not to have any babies while I'm gone. She laughed, the sound bright in the crisp winter air. "I'll do my best." As she watched him ride away, Rebecca felt the baby move within her. "Well, little one," she murmured, "life certainly takes unexpected turns." Isaac returned the next day as promised, and the day after that. As Christmas approached, he brought a small pine tree for the cabin and helped Rebecca decorate it with strings of dried berries and paper ornaments they made together. On Christmas Eve, after they had shared a special dinner of venison and apple pie, Isaac presented Rebecca with a gift, a beautiful wooden cradle he had crafted himself. "Isaac," she breathed, running her fingers over the smooth wood and delicate carvings. "It's exquisite." "Every child deserves a proper place to sleep," he said simply. Rebecca gave him her gift, a knitted scarf and a journal bound in leather she had traded her wedding ring to obtain. "For your stories," she explained. "The ones you tell me, they should be written down." Isaac's eyes grew suspiciously bright as he accepted the gifts. "Thank you," he said hoarsely. That night before leaving, he kissed her again, a deeper, more confident kiss that left them both breathless. As they stood in the doorway, reluctant to part, Isaac took her hands in his. "Rebecca," he began hesitantly, "I've been thinking. Your baby will be here soon and you shouldn't be alone. I know it's sudden and perhaps improper, but would you consider marrying me?" Rebecca stared at him, stunned. "Isaac, you don't have to answer now," he hurried on. "I know you're still grieving Thomas, and we've known each other only a short time, but I care for you deeply, and I would be honored to help raise your child, to provide for you both." Rebecca felt tears spring to her eyes. The offer was generous, perhaps the most generous anyone had ever made her, but something held her back. "I can't," she said softly. "Not yet. It's not that I don't care for you, because I do, more than I thought possible, but marriage should be more than convenience or protection. And I'm not ready to know if what I feel for you is enough." Isaac nodded slowly, disappointment clear in his eyes but respect as well. "I understand. The offer remains open whenever, if ever, you decide." He kissed her once more, gently, then departed into the Christmas Eve night, leaving Rebecca standing in the doorway, her heart torn between gratitude for his offer and fear that she had made a terrible mistake. The weeks after Christmas passed in a blur for Rebecca. Her pregnancy advanced, making even simple tasks difficult. True to his word, Isaac continued to visit regularly, never mentioning his proposal again but showing his devotion in countless small ways. Word of their friendship had indeed spread through Mineral Point, bringing disapproving glances when Rebecca ventured into town, but also a grudging respect. Isaac Reynolds had become a valued member of the community, fair in his business dealings and generous in times of need. His clear regard for the widowed Mrs. Randall gave her a status she had not previously enjoyed. Even Mabel Thornton had moderated her public criticism, though Rebecca occasionally caught the woman watching her with narrowed eyes when she thought herself unobserved. January arrived with bitter cold and more snow. Rebecca's due date approached, bringing with it increasing anxiety. Though she maintained a brave face for Isaac, in the quiet of night she often found herself gripped by fear of the birth, fear of raising a child alone, fear of the future. On the night of January 10th, with a full moon illuminating the snow-covered landscape, Rebecca's labor began in earnest. The pain started shortly after sunset, mild at first but steadily increasing in intensity. She had arranged for the neighbor boy, 12-year-old Peter Miller, to fetch Mrs. Peterson when the time came, but the heavy snow made her reluctant to send him out in the dark. She decided to wait until morning, certain that first labors were long affairs, according to her mother's teachings. By midnight, however, Rebecca realized her mistake. The contractions were coming fast and hard, and she could feel the baby moving down. Wrapping herself in her warmest cloak, she struggled through the snow to the Miller farm, waking the family with her pounding on their door. "The baby's coming," she gasped when Mrs. Miller appeared. "I need help." Mrs. Miller acted quickly, sending her husband for Mrs. Peterson while she accompanied Rebecca back to her cabin. By the time they arrived, Rebecca could barely walk, the pains coming one atop the other. "This baby isn't waiting," Mrs. Miller said grimly, helping Rebecca to the bed. "I've birthed 8 of my own, so between us, we'll manage." Through the next 2 hours, Rebecca labored with Mrs. Miller's steady encouragement. When Mrs. Peterson finally arrived, the baby's head was already crowning. "You're doing fine, Rebecca, Mrs. Peterson assured her, taking charge of the situation. "One more good push should do it." With a cry that seemed torn from the depths of her soul, Rebecca gave one final, mighty push, and her child slid into the world. A moment of silence, then a lusty wail filled the cabin. "A boy, Mrs. Peterson announced, wrapping the squalling infant in clean linens. "A fine, healthy boy." Rebecca collapsed against the pillows, exhausted but desperate to see her child. Mrs. Peterson placed the tiny bundle in her arms, and Rebecca gazed down at her son's red, wrinkled face with wonder. "Thomas," she whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. "His name is Thomas after his father." Mrs. Miller squeezed her shoulder. "He'd be proud, Rebecca, so proud." As dawn broke over Mineral Point, Rebecca dozed with her newborn son cradled against her chest. Mrs. Peterson had gone home after ensuring both mother and baby were well, but Mrs. Miller remained, tending the fire and preparing a strengthening broth. The sound of approaching hoofbeats roused Rebecca from her light sleep. Mrs. Miller went to the window. "It's Mr. Reynolds," she reported. "Riding like the devil's on his tail." Moments later, Isaac burst through the door, his face pale with worry. "Rebecca," Peter Miller said. He stopped short at the sight of her in bed with the tiny bundle. "Come meet Thomas," Rebecca said softly. Isaac approached slowly, reverently, his eyes fixed on the small face peeking from the blankets. "He's perfect," he breathed, carefully sitting on the edge of the bed. "Would you like to hold him?" Rebecca offered. With trembling hands, Isaac accepted the newborn, cradling him with a tenderness that brought fresh tears to Rebecca's eyes. Little Thomas yawned, his tiny fist escaping the blanket to wave in the air. Isaac caught it gently with one finger, and the baby reflexively grasped it. "Strong grip," Isaac noted, his voice thick with emotion. "Like his mother." Mrs. Miller discreetly excused herself to fetch more water, leaving them alone. In the quiet of the morning, with winter sunlight streaming through the window, Rebecca watched Isaac with her son and felt her heart expand with love for both of them. "I've been thinking about your proposal," she said quietly. Isaac looked up, hope and uncertainty warring in his expression. "And I'm still not sure if what I feel is enough," she admitted. "But I know that I want you in our lives, Thomas's and mine, and I'm willing to take that chance if you are." Isaac carefully returned the baby to her arms, then took her face between his hands. "Rebecca Randall," he said solemnly, "I have loved you since that day in the general store when you stood tall against Mabel Thornton's cruelty. I loved you when you taught me to make bread. I loved you through the blizzard and every day since. I will love your son as my own, and I will spend every day proving that your trust in me is warranted." Rebecca smiled through her tears. "Then yes, Isaac Reynolds, I will marry you." He kissed her then, a kiss full of promise and future, while baby Thomas slept peacefully between them. They were married 2 weeks later in the small church in Mineral Point, with baby Thomas bundled against the cold and the entire town in attendance. Some came out of genuine goodwill, others from curiosity, but all witnessed the quiet joy on the couple's faces as they spoke their vows. Pastor Williams had been initially reluctant to perform the ceremony so soon after Thomas's birth, concerned about appearances. But Isaac had been persuasive, pointing out that a newborn needed a father's protection, especially in the harsh Wisconsin winter. Besides, Isaac had added with unexpected humor, if we wait for the gossips to approve, we'll both be in our graves before we wed. After the ceremony, they held a small reception at the town hall. Isaac had spared no expense, providing a feast that would be talked about for months. Even Mabel Thornton attended, offering stiff congratulations and admiring baby Thomas with what appeared to be genuine interest. "He has your coloring," she told Rebecca, touching the infant's copper curls. "He'll be a handsome boy." "Thank you, Mrs. Thornton," Rebecca replied, surprised by the overture. Mabel hesitated, then added quietly, "I may have been unnecessarily harsh in my assessment of your situation. My husband has reminded me that Christian charity extends to understanding as well as material assistance." It wasn't quite an apology, but Rebecca recognized the effort it had cost the proud woman. "Perhaps you might visit us sometime," she offered, "when the weather improves." A tentative smile crossed Mabel's face. "I'd like that." As the celebration continued around them, Isaac drew Rebecca aside, baby Thomas sleeping in her arms. "Happy?" he asked, his arms slipping around her waist. "Very," she assured him. "Though I'm also exhausted. Your son has your energy. He was up half the night." Isaac's face softened at the words, "your son." He gently touched Thomas's cheek. "He may not have my blood, but he has my heart," he said simply, "as does his mother." Later that evening, when they returned to Rebecca's cabin, their cabin now, Isaac carried in the last of their wedding gifts and stoked the fire while Rebecca nursed Thomas. "I have one more gift for you," Isaac said when she had settled the baby in his cradle. He handed her a folded document. Rebecca opened it, scanning the legal language with confusion until she reached the bottom. "Isaac, this is the deed to my ranch," he confirmed, "now in both our names, and I've filed paperwork to legally adopt Thomas if that meets with your approval. He should have every protection the law can provide." Rebecca was speechless. The security this represented, land in her own name, legal recognition for her son, was beyond anything she had expected. "You don't need to do this," she finally said. "I know," Isaac replied. "I want to. You and Thomas are my family now. Everything I have is yours." Rebecca set the deed aside and went to him, wrapping her arms around his waist and resting her head against his chest. She felt his heart beating steadily beneath her cheek. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything. For that day in the market when you stood up for me. For saying I deserved kindness." Isaac tilted her chin up, his eyes serious. "You deserved so much more than kindness, Rebecca. You deserved love, and now you have it for as long as I live." Spring came early to Mineral Point that year. By late March, the snow had melted, revealing tender green shoots pushing through the earth. Rebecca stood on the porch of their home, no longer the small cabin by the creek, but Isaac's more substantial ranch house, watching as her husband worked with a new colt in the corral. Thomas, now 3 months old, gurgled in her arms, his bright eyes following the movement of the horses. He had grown strong and healthy through the winter months, thriving under the love of both his parents. Rebecca still thought of Thomas Randall sometimes, wondering what he would think of the life she had built without him. She kept his memory alive for his son, telling the baby stories of his birth father's courage and dreams. Isaac encouraged this, secure enough in his role as Thomas's papa to honor the man who had come before. As she watched, Isaac completed his work with the colt and turned toward the house, his face breaking into a smile when he spotted her. He jogged across the yard, taking the porch steps two at a time. "How are my two favorite people?" he asked, kissing her cheek and then Thomas's forehead. "Enjoying the sunshine," Rebecca replied, "and waiting for you to finish so we can have lunch." Isaac took the baby from her arms, lifting him high above his head to make him laugh. "What do you say, young man? Ready to learn about horses after we eat?" Rebecca smiled at their interaction. In just 3 months, Isaac had become a devoted father, spending every free moment with Thomas, talking to him about ranching, reading to him from books, singing him to sleep with old Texas lullabies. As they went inside for lunch, Rebecca felt a wave of contentment wash over her. Their life wasn't perfect. The ranch demanded constant work. Money was sometimes tight, and the memories of those they had lost still brought occasional pain. But they had found something precious together, a second chance at happiness neither had expected. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the Wisconsin hills in gold and crimson, Thomas sleeping peacefully in his cradle beside them, Isaac reached for Rebecca's hand. "I've been thinking," he said. "A dangerous pastime," she teased. He chuckled, squeezing her fingers. "I thought perhaps we might plant an apple orchard on the east slope. Good drainage there, protected from the worst winds. In a few years we could sell the fruit in town." "Planning for the future?" Rebecca asked, smiling. "Our future," he confirmed. "Yours, mine, Thomas's. And perhaps others who might join us." Rebecca raised an eyebrow. "Others, if you wanted," Isaac said carefully. "More children, I mean, not right away, of course, but someday." The thought had crossed Rebecca's mind as well, watching Isaac with Thomas. He was a natural father, and the love between them was growing stronger each day. "I think I'd like that," she said softly. "Someday." Isaac lifted her hand to his lips. "No rush, we have time," and they did. As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Rebecca leaned her head against her husband's shoulder, grateful for the unexpected turn her life had taken. From the depths of grief and uncertainty, she had found her way to this moment of peace and possibility. "I love you, Isaac Reynolds," she whispered. "And I love you, Rebecca Reynolds," he replied. "Now and always." In the years that followed, the Reynolds family flourished. The horse ranch prospered under Isaac's skilled management, becoming known throughout Wisconsin and beyond for its fine stock. The apple orchard Rebecca had planted yielded its first substantial harvest when Thomas was 5, and her preserves and cider became sought-after items in the Mineral Point market. Thomas grew into a strong, curious boy with his mother's copper hair and his adoptive father's steady temperament. When he was 6, he gained a sister, Sarah Elizabeth Reynolds, named for Isaac's lost daughter and Rebecca's mother. 2 years later, a brother joined the family, James William Reynolds, completing their happiness. The cabin where Rebecca had once faced an uncertain future alone became a guest house for visitors to the ranch. Occasionally, when the main house was full of children's laughter and activity, Rebecca would slip away to the quiet cabin for a moment of reflection. She would stand in the doorway, remembering the blizzard, the birth, the proposal, all the moments that had led her to this abundant life. And sometimes, on market days in Mineral Point, Rebecca would pass the spot outside Wilcox's general store where a kind cowboy had first spoken to a pregnant widow in distress. "You deserve kindness," he had said, changing the course of her life with that simple truth. The kindness had blossomed into love, and the love had created a family, not replacing what was lost, but building something new and beautiful from the ashes of grief. It was, Rebecca reflected as she gathered her children and husband close each night, the greatest blessing she could have imagined, and more than she had ever dared to hope for.